Settle in now, find a comfortable position, let your shoulders soften, and allow your breathing to slow. There is nowhere you need to go and nothing you need to remember. Tonight, we are not rushing through history. We are drifting through it, gently, quietly, one building at a time. Imagine a city before the noise, before the lights. Before the towering shapes of steel and glass. Long before New York was called New York, this land was already shaped by human hands. Not in sharp angles or tall walls, but in soft, practical forms that followed the rhythm of nature. The Lenape people lived here for generations, building shelters from wood, bark, and earth. Their structures were not meant to dominate the land, but to rest within it. Longhouses stretched gently across clearings, low and warm, designed to hold families, stories, and seasons together. These early buildings did not aim to last forever. They were rebuilt when needed, repaired when worn, and returned to the earth when their time passed. Architecture was not about permanence yet. It was about balance, shelter from rain, warmth in winter, shade in summer, a quiet understanding between people and place. If you were standing on Manhattan Island during this time, you would not see skylines or streets. You would see trees bending in the wind, smoke rising softly from cooking fires, and paths worn gently into the ground by footsteps repeated over many years. The architecture of the land was humble, calm, and deeply connected to daily life. Then, slowly, the land began to change. In the early 1600s, European settlers arrived, bringing with them a very different idea of buildings. When the Dutch established New Amsterdam, they brought stone, brick, and the belief that buildings should endure. The earliest structures were simple and practical, built close together, hugging narrow dirt streets. Homes were small, often just 1 or 2 rooms, with steep roofs to shed rain and snow. Dutch houses had thick walls and tiny windows. Glass was expensive and warmth was precious. Inside, life revolved around the hearth. The architecture reflected caution, patience, and survival. Buildings were not decorative, they were protective, strong, quiet. Wooden beams creaked softly as seasons passed. Brick walls absorbed the cold of winter and released it slowly as warmth returned. These early homes were not impressive, but they were steady. They watched the city's first slow steps. As the settlement grew, so did its buildings. Churches appeared, modest but sturdy. Warehouses lined the waterfront, storing goods that arrived by ship. The harbor became a place of movement, while the buildings remained still, watching. When the British took control and renamed the city New York, architectural styles shifted gently again. Georgian buildings appeared, symmetrical and orderly, reflecting a desire for structure and control. Red brick facades lined the streets, windows aligned neatly, doors centered with quiet confidence. These buildings did not shout, they whispered stability. Daily life unfolded within them. Shopkeepers opened wooden shutters each morning. Families climbed narrow staircases to sleep in small upstairs rooms. Candles flickered against plastered walls. Outside, the streets were uneven, often muddy, filled with the slow sounds of carts and conversation. Architecture at this time was deeply tied to routine. Buildings rose with the sun and rested with the night. There were no electric lights to brighten the dark, no elevators to lift people upward. The city expanded outward, not upward, spreading gently across the land. As years passed, New York slowly transformed from a colonial town into a growing city. By the late 1700s and early 1800s, architecture began reflecting ambition, but still quietly. Federal-style buildings appeared, with delicate ornamentation, curved staircases, and refined proportions. These structures suggested comfort rather than power. Brownstone would soon become a defining material, but not yet. For now, brick and wood still ruled. Buildings remained human in scale. You could touch the roof. You could recognize your neighbor's window. Streets felt personal. Life moved at the speed of walking. Children played near stoops. Laundry hung between buildings, soft fabrics swaying in the air. Architecture framed daily life rather than overwhelming it. Every building had a story, but none demanded attention. This was a city learning how to build, one careful step at a time. As you imagine these early streets, let your breathing slow even more. Picture the soft colors of brick warmed by afternoon light. Hear the distant sound of water along the shore. Smell wood smoke drifting through narrow lanes. There is no hurry here, No skyline yet, just a city slowly discovering what it could become. And as New York continued to grow, layer by layer, century by century, its buildings would begin to rise not suddenly, not loudly, but with patience, curiosity, and time. We will follow that journey slowly in the next part. The city does not change all at once. It never has. Instead, New York grows the way a person grows, quietly, year by year, sometimes without even noticing. By the early 1800s, the town had begun to stretch beyond its original boundaries. Fields turned into streets, paths became roads, and architecture started to settle into something more familiar, more domestic, more gently ambitious. This was the century of walking cities. People still lived close to their work. A shopkeeper slept above the shop. A craftsman worked by a window facing the street. Buildings were no longer just shelters. They were places of routine, of repetition, of ordinary life unfolding slowly. Brick became the language of the city. Rows of brick houses appeared, standing shoulder to shoulder like polite neighbors. They were narrow, tall enough for 2 or 3 stories, and almost identical to one another. This sameness was comforting. It meant predictability. It meant belonging. Brownstone, quarried from nearby regions, soon began to shape entire neighborhoods. Its warm, reddish-brown surface absorbed sunlight during the day and released it slowly as evening arrived. These buildings did not sparkle or shine. They glowed softly. If you walked down a street lined with brownstones in the mid-19th century, you would hear the quiet sounds of daily life. Footsteps on stone stoops, doors opening and closing, the gentle clatter of dishes through open windows. The city was alive but never rushed. Each brownstone had its own rhythm. A front stoop that lifted the entrance just above street level, tall windows to invite light, decorative iron railings that were more graceful than necessary. Inside, narrow staircases curved upward, connecting rooms stacked one above the other like chapters in a book. These homes were built for families, for patience, for time. Gas lamps lined the streets, casting a soft glow after sunset. Shadows stretched along brick walls. The city at night was quiet enough to hear horses breathing, wheels rolling, distant voices fading into the dark. Architecture shaped behavior. Because buildings were close together, neighbors knew one another. Because streets were narrow, movement was slow. Because buildings were solid, life felt anchored. During this time, New York was not yet reaching for the sky. It was spreading outward, carefully, block by block. Neighborhoods like Brooklyn Heights and Harlem began forming their own identities, each with subtle architectural differences that reflected who lived there and how they lived. Public buildings also began to appear with quiet confidence. Courthouses, libraries, schools, and churches rose with classical influences, columns, pediments, balanced proportions. These structures borrowed ideas from ancient Greece and Rome, not to impress, but to suggest stability and order. They told people gently that this city was here to stay. Inside these buildings, life was unremarkable in the best way. Clerks wrote slowly by hand. Teachers spoke softly to small classes. Books rested on wooden shelves, waiting patiently to be opened. Even factories, which would later become symbols of noise and motion, were once modest structures. Brick workshops with large windows designed to let daylight in. Work followed the sun. When the light faded, the city rested. Architecture did not fight nature yet. It cooperated. As immigration increased, housing adapted. Tenement buildings emerged, simple, repetitive structures built to house many families. Early tenements were cramped but still orderly, with shared courtyards that allowed air and light to drift inside. Laundry lines crossed open spaces. Children played between buildings. Life found its way into every corner. Even here, architecture remained restrained, functional, unadorned. It reflected necessity rather than ambition. Streets became grids, not because it was exciting, but because it was efficient. The famous grid plan of Manhattan brought predictability to movement. Blocks repeated endlessly, offering a quiet sense of orientation. You always knew where you were. You always knew how far you had to go. This repetition was calming. The city became a place of patterns. Windows aligned, doors repeated, streets extended forward with gentle certainty. Architecture was no longer just about shelter, it was about organization. And still no skyscrapers. Buildings rarely rose above 5 or 6 stories. Ladders reached rooftops easily. Church steeples stood taller than anything else, guiding the eye upward without overwhelming it. The sky remained wide and open. As evening fell, families gathered indoors. Lamps were lit. Curtains drawn, brick walls held warmth. Outside, the city exhaled. Imagine walking through this New York, not the one you know, but the one that existed before ambition sharpened its edges. A city of stoops and shutters, of brick dust and lamplight, of measured growth. This was the calm before vertical dreams. The foundations were being laid, not just in stone and brick, but in habits. In expectations, in the belief that buildings could shape how people lived together. And soon, very soon, those buildings would begin to stretch upward, but not yet. For now, the city remains grounded, breathing, waiting. Let your thoughts slow as the streets grow quiet. Feel the warmth of stone after sunset. Listen to the soft echo of footsteps fading into history. In the next part, the city will begin to rise carefully, thoughtfully, as elevators, steel, and new ideas quietly reshape the skyline. But for this moment, rest here, in the low-rise city, where architecture still sleeps close to the ground. The idea of building upward did not arrive with excitement. It arrived with practicality. By the late 1800s, New York had grown dense. Streets were full, blocks were crowded, and land had become precious. The city did not want to climb into the sky at first. It simply needed more room to breathe, so architects and builders began experimenting slowly with height. At first, the buildings were only slightly taller than before. 6 stories became 8. 8 became 10. From the street, the change felt subtle. But for the people who worked inside these buildings, something new was happening. Windows opened higher above the ground. Views stretched farther. Light entered rooms from angles never seen before. Then came the elevator. Before elevators, height was tiring. Stairs determined how high people were willing to go. The introduction of safe, reliable elevators changed everything, but quietly. Elevators did not roar or announce themselves. They moved smoothly, lifting people with gentle precision. Suddenly, height became comfortable. Early tall buildings were not glass towers. They were masonry structures, thick, solid, reassuring. Steel frames hid beneath stone and brick facades, invisible to passers-by. From the outside, these buildings still felt traditional. From the inside, they were revolutionary. Architects borrowed styles from the past to soften the future. Gothic arches appeared on office buildings. Classical columns framed entrances. Decorative cornices crowned rooftops. These buildings did not look like machines. They looked like familiar friends, just slightly taller than expected. Life inside them was calm and orderly. Offices were filled with wooden desks, paper ledgers, quiet conversations. Windows opened to let in air. Clerks worked slowly, writing by hand, the sound of pages turning mixing with distant street noise below. From above, the city looked different. Horse-drawn carts moved like toys. People became patterns rather than individuals. The river shimmered quietly in the distance. Height did not bring excitement, it brought perspective. Skyscrapers were not yet symbols of power. They were tools, solutions. As more tall buildings appeared, the skyline began to change in a gentle, uneven way. No building dominated. Each one simply added itself to the view, like a new voice joining a calm conversation. Construction itself was surprisingly quiet by modern standards. Without heavy machinery, much of the work was done by hand. Steel beams were lifted carefully. Stone was placed deliberately. There was patience in the process. Architecture still respected time. Buildings were designed to last, not to impress. Facades were detailed because hands would touch them. Entrances were grand, but not overwhelming. Lobbies were quiet spaces with marble floors, soft echoes, and natural light filtering from above. These early skyscrapers did not rush people. They guided them. As the 20th century approached, the city began to understand itself differently. Architecture was no longer just about shelter or routine. It was about coordination, about managing movement, about allowing thousands of people to work, live, and rest within a shared vertical space. Yet even now, the city remained calm at its core. Streets still ended at sunset. Offices emptied slowly. Elevators descended one by one. Lights dimmed behind tall windows. Above it all, the sky remained open. Imagine standing on a rooftop at this time. no neon lights, no glowing screens. Just rooftops stretching into the distance, chimneys releasing faint trails of smoke, the sound of the river moving steadily beside the city. This was New York learning how to rise without losing its balance, and it succeeded carefully. Soon, architecture would grow bolder, shapes would become sharper, styles more confident. But for now, the city was still experimenting, still listening to itself, still climbing one floor at a time. Let your breathing slow as the buildings settle into place. Feel the steady rhythm of elevators moving gently up and down. Watch the city lights flicker softly as night deepens. In the next part, the skyline will find its voice through Art Deco, graceful towers, and buildings that reflect dreams without shouting them. But for now, rest here, in the early vertical city. Balanced between earth and sky, as the new century settled in, New York's buildings began to express something subtle and hopeful. The city had learned how to rise, now it wanted to do so with grace. This was not a sudden change. It arrived slowly, like a new way of speaking that people adopt without noticing. Lines became cleaner, shapes became more deliberate. Ornamentation simplified, but never disappeared. Architecture began to hum with a soft rhythm. Art Deco emerged as a calm conversation between tradition and modern life. These buildings were not aggressive, they were composed. Their setbacks stepped upward like quiet staircases carved into the sky, allowing light and air to drift gently down to the streets below. Sunlight slid across stone and metal, creating patterns that changed throughout the day. Materials mattered. Limestone felt cool and steady. Marble lobbies reflected light softly. Bronze details aged gracefully, darkening with time rather than demanding attention. Inside, spaces were designed to soothe movement. Wide corridors, rounded corners. Floors that echoed just enough to remind you where you were. Elevators became smoother, quieter. They glided rather than climbed. Life inside these buildings followed an unhurried routine. Office workers arrived in the morning, coats folded carefully over chairs. Papers were arranged, windows were cracked open, fans stirred warm air gently in summer. Radiators whispered softly in winter. Outside, the streets adapted to height. Shadows stretched longer but never felt heavy. Buildings framed the sky instead of blocking it. Looking up felt natural now. Even at night, the city remained calm. Lights glowed from windows like distant stars. Architectural lighting traced vertical lines, not to dazzle, but to define. The skyline became legible, each building readable, each silhouette distinct yet harmonious. Residential towers followed the same philosophy. Apartments were designed for rest. Thick walls muted sound. Windows were tall, allowing daylight to drift in without effort. Bedrooms were placed away from street noise. Architecture began to care deeply about sleep, even in a growing city. Public spaces also evolved. Train stations became places of quiet movement rather than chaos. Waiting rooms were spacious. Benches were polished by years of use. Ceilings lifted upward, allowing breath and sound to disperse gently. Even crowds felt organized, softened by scale and symmetry. As decades passed, styles blended rather than competed. Art Deco slowly gave way to mid-century modern simplicity. Buildings became more restrained. Glass appeared more frequently, but always framed carefully. Steel lines were clean. Interiors favored openness. The city learned restraint. Not every building needed decoration. Not every structure needed to be remembered. Many were simply meant to serve, quietly and well. Office towers housed daily routines. Apartment buildings held countless ordinary evenings. Schools echoed with footsteps and calm voices. Architecture became a background presence, reliable, steady, patient. By the mid-20th century, New York had matured. Its skyline no longer felt experimental. It felt settled. Buildings stood with confidence, knowing their place among others. No one structure demanded dominance. Together, they formed a calm composition. Imagine drifting through this city at night. The hum of traffic is distant. Windows glow softly. Elevators pause between floors. Radiators click gently. The river reflects scattered lights without urgency. Architecture no longer pushes upward. It rests. Let your thoughts slow as the city does the same. Feel the balance between height and quiet. Notice how even the tallest buildings seem to stand gently, aware of the ground beneath them. In the final part, we will drift into modern New York, not the loud version, but the overlooked one. The buildings people pass every day without noticing, the calm spaces that still exist between glass and steel, for now stay here, in the softly glowing city. Where architecture has learned how to be calm, modern New York often feels fast when seen from a distance. Glass towers, reflections, movement everywhere. But when you move closer, when you stop rushing, the city softens. Architecture here no longer tries to prove anything. Many of the buildings you pass every day are calm, almost invisible. Office towers that quietly open their doors each morning. Apartment buildings that hold thousands of ordinary lives without asking for attention. Structures designed not to be noticed, but to be lived with. Glass became common, but not cold. Modern buildings reflect the sky gently, borrowing its colors rather than overpowering it. On cloudy days, they turn soft and gray. At sunset, they glow briefly with warmth. At night, they darken, becoming quiet silhouettes among quieter streets. Inside these buildings, life is repetitive in the most peaceful way. Elevators rise and fall with soft tones. Hallways stretch calmly, lit evenly without drama. Doors close gently. Windows frame small portions of the city, a tree, a streetlight, a distant building, enough to feel connected, not overwhelmed. Architecture now focuses on comfort. Sound is absorbed. Light is controlled. Temperature remains steady. Buildings breathe slowly through ventilation systems you never notice. The city learned over centuries how to create spaces where people can rest even while surrounded by millions. Older buildings remain too. Brownstones still line quiet streets, unchanged in spirit. Art Deco towers still glow at night, dignified and patient. Early skyscrapers still stand, their stone facades weathered but steady, reminding the city where it came from. New architecture does not erase the old. It layers itself gently on top. This layering is what makes New York feel deep rather than loud. Every block holds multiple centuries at once. A glass tower beside a brick building, a modern lobby behind a historic facade, a quiet courtyard hidden between busy streets. Architecture here teaches you to look slowly. At night, the city changes again. Traffic fades, offices empty, lights turn off floor by floor. Windows go dark, not all at once, but gradually, like a yawn spreading through the skyline. The city does not sleep suddenly. It drifts. Walk through New York late at night and architecture becomes intimate. You notice details, the texture of stone under streetlights, the echo of your footsteps, the way buildings guide wind gently down the street, the way even tall structures seem to lean inward, holding the quiet. This is the version of New York most people miss. A city not built for spectacle, but for continuity, for routine, for returning home, for sleeping. Architecture here has completed its long journey. From temporary shelters made of wood and earth, to brick homes and stoops, to careful towers of steel and stone, to glass structures that reflect more than they impose. The city learned that height does not require noise, that ambition can be calm, that buildings can stand tall without shouting. As you rest now, imagine New York breathing. Buildings standing quietly in the dark, windows resting, streets emptying, the skyline settling into itself. There is nothing left to build tonight, nothing left to rise, only stillness and time. Let your breathing slow completely. Let the city fade into background shapes. Let the story end without an ending. New York remains, quietly standing, as you drift into sleep.